A week passed since the strange morning when Karen called the cops on Sheriff Jake Lawson. For most people, it would have been an embarrassing mistake that faded away, but not for Karen. The whole neighborhood had heard what happened. People at the HOA meeting had laughed quietly when Jake's name came up. Some even joked, "Careful, don't find the sheriff again." Karen pretended not to care, but inside she was furious. She wasn't used to people making fun of her. She wanted to prove she was right, that she still had control. And in her mind, the only way to do that was to make Jake follow the rules, even if they weren't his. Jake, on the other hand, had already forgotten about it. He spent his mornings checking fences, feeding his horses, and fixing his barn roof. Life on the ranch went on like always. He didn't hold grudges. Blue, his dog, ran beside him as he rode his horse through the fields. The peace of the land washed away the noise from town. But quiet never lasted too long when someone like Karen was around. One afternoon, as Jake was returning from town, he saw 3 SUVs parked near his front gate. A group of people stood beside them, all dressed neatly, holding clipboards and cameras. Karen was in the center, smiling proudly as if she were hosting a press event. Jake slowed his truck and pulled over. He could already feel Blue's low growl from the passenger seat. He stepped out calmly. "Afternoon, folks," he said, tipping his hat. "Can I help you with something?" Karen turned around with a tight smile. "We're here on official HOA business," she said confidently. "After reviewing our maps, we've decided this area falls under Lakeview's property border. We're issuing a notice to clear your barn, repaint your fence, and remove that trailer within 7 days." Jake blinked slowly. "You're kidding, right?" Karen shook her head. "No, I'm very serious. You can't keep ignoring the rules just because you used to wear a badge." Jake crossed his arms. "Still wear one," he said quietly. "You might want to check your facts before you make false claims again." Karen handed him a stack of papers. "Here's the notice. You can read it, or you can argue it in court." Jake flipped through the papers. They were full of fancy words and legal-sounding lines that didn't make sense. None of it had any real authority, but it was clear Karen had spent time trying to make it look official. Behind her, the other HOA members were whispering nervously. Some looked uncomfortable. A few looked like they regretted coming. Jake sighed. "You're wasting everyone's time," he said softly. "This land doesn't belong to your development. You folks build next to county property. You don't own the view. You just share the road." Karen crossed her arms. "We'll see what the law says," she snapped. "We've already sent these documents to the county office." Jake gave a small smile. "Then I'll see you there." He got back into his truck and drove off, leaving the group behind. Blue barked as they pulled into the driveway. "I guess some people never learn," Jake muttered. That evening, he went through the so-called paperwork again. It had no county stamp, no real authority. Just HOA letterheads and Karen's signature. He knew it wouldn't hold up, but something inside him told him this wasn't over. People like Karen didn't back down until they embarrassed themselves. The next morning, Jake received a call from the county clerk's office. "Sheriff Lawson," the woman on the line said, trying not to laugh. "You might want to come down here." Someone filed an HOA complaint against. "Well, against you." Jake chuckled. "I'll be there in an hour." When he arrived, the whole office was smiling. They handed him the report. It was full of pictures of his barn, his fence, even Blue. At the bottom was Karen's signature and a bold claim that Jake's ranch violated community aesthetics. The clerk shook her head. "She's made 4 phone calls already asking when we'll send someone to find you." Jake laughed quietly. "Don't worry about it. I'll handle it." That weekend, the county scheduled a public meeting about property borders, something Karen had actually requested. She thought it would make her look strong in front of her neighbors. Jake showed up in plain clothes, sitting quietly in the back row. The small meeting room filled up fast. Dozens of residents came, curious to see what would happen. The mayor, a friendly older man, stood at the front with a big map behind him. Karen was the first to speak. "Mr. Mayor, we at the Lakeview Estates community are trying to maintain standards. This ranch property has been lowering our values for months. It's right next to our entrance and doesn't meet our visual requirements." The mayor raised an eyebrow. "Karen, are you saying the ranch is inside your neighborhood's boundaries?" "Yes," she said confidently, holding up her printed maps. "It clearly overlaps." The mayor smiled politely. "Funny, because this is the official county map." He pointed to the large map on the board behind him. "This line here shows the border. The ranch sits entirely outside your HOA's limits. In fact, that property belongs to the man sitting right there." He gestured toward Jake. Karen turned, eyes wide, realizing everyone was looking at her. Jake stood up slowly, calm, and polite. "Good evening," he said. "I'm Sheriff Jake Lawson. I appreciate the chance to clear this up." The room went silent. Karen's face went pale. People started whispering. Even her own HOA members looked down at their shoes. Jake continued, "I've got no problem with folks wanting to keep their neighborhood nice. But respect works both ways. My ranch is part of this county, not the HOA. And as sheriff, it's my duty to protect every citizen, even from unnecessary trouble like this." The mayor nodded. "That's correct. The HOA has no authority on his land." Case closed. Karen tried to speak, but her voice trembled. I didn't mean to cause." Jake smiled kindly. "It's all right, ma'am. Just try to be a good neighbor. The best communities are built on kindness, not control." The room burst into quiet applause. A few people patted Jake on the back as he walked out. Others gave Karen sympathetic looks, but she couldn't meet their eyes. Her clipboard hung loosely by her side, and for once, she had nothing to say. Outside, Jake took a deep breath of fresh air. Blue waited patiently in the truck, wagging his tail. "All done, buddy," Jake said, smiling. "Let's head home." As he drove back to the ranch, the sunset painted the sky orange and pink. The fields glowed softly, and the wind carried the smell of hay. Life was peaceful again. When he reached the porch, he saw something surprising: a small basket sitting by the steps. Inside was a note written in neat handwriting. "Sheriff Lawson, I owe you an apology. I let pride get in the way of being a good neighbor. Thank you for handling things kindly. I'll do better. Karen." Jake smiled as he folded the note. He set it on the porch railing and looked out at the open land. "Guess people can change," he murmured. Blue barked softly as if he agreed. In the days that followed, something unexpected happened. Karen started greeting him whenever she passed by. She even sent over a few of the HOA members to help paint his fence as a peace gesture. The same people who once judged him were now asking him for advice on community safety. Jake didn't brag or lecture. He simply helped when needed and shared what he knew about patience and fairness. Slowly, the tension between the ranch and the neighborhood faded. Months later, the HOA invited him to speak at their summer barbecue. Jake showed up with Blue, wearing his old hat and a friendly smile. He told funny stories about ranch life and reminded everyone that good neighbors are worth more than perfect lawns. The crowd laughed and clapped. Even Karen smiled, though a bit shyly. When the sun set, Jake stood by his truck watching families laugh together. He felt proud, not just as a sheriff, but as a man who believed peace could be built through understanding. Blue jumped into the passenger seat, ready to head home. Jake looked one last time at the quiet houses across the road and said softly, "I think this town's finally learning what real law and order means." As he drove off into the golden light, the sound of laughter followed him. The road back to his ranch felt calm, steady, and right, just like his heart. The land, the people, even the once proud HOA leader had all learned something simple that summer. Respect isn't about rules or control. It's about how you treat the person next door. And from that day on, no one ever called the cops on Sheriff Jake Lawson again. Jake Lawson woke up before sunrise, as he always did. The smell of coffee filled his small ranch house, and the sound of his horses echoed softly in the open field. The morning air was cool, and a golden mist lay over the grass. Jake loved this time of day. It reminded him that peace still existed somewhere in the world. After 20 years of wearing the sheriff's badge, he had seen enough noise and chaos to know the value of quiet. His ranch was his safe place, far from town, where the only sounds were the wind and the animals. Jake sat on the porch with his old mug and watched the sky turn orange. His loyal dog, Blue, sat beside him, tail wagging. The land around them stretched for miles. Every inch had been earned with years of hard work. The fences, the barn, the stables, Jake had built them himself. The place might not look fancy, but to him, it was perfect. It wasn't under any homeowners association or city code. It was pure country land, owned fair and square. A few months earlier, new houses had been built across the road. They called it Lakeview Estates, a high-end neighborhood with bright lawns, stone mailboxes, and people who loved to show off their wealth. They had rules for everything: how short the grass could be, what color the front door had to be, even what kind of flowers could be planted. Jake didn't pay much attention to them until one of the new residents decided she didn't like what she saw across the road. Her name was Karen Simmons. She was in her late 40s, always dressed like she was going to a meeting, and never seen without her sunglasses and clipboard. She had appointed herself the head of the HOA, even though no one remembered voting for her. From the first day she moved in, Karen believed she ran the whole area. To her, Jake's ranch didn't look neat enough for her liking. His old pickup, wooden fence, and dusty trailer bothered her more than she could stand. That Sunday morning, Jake saw her black SUV stop near his front gate. She stepped out quickly, clutching her clipboard as if it gave her power. She walked right up to the fence, heels clicking on the gravel. Jake sighed and stood up, already guessing what this was about. Blue growled softly, sensing his owner's irritation. "Good morning, ma'am," Jake said calmly. Karen didn't bother with small talk. "You can't park that trailer there," she said sharply. "It violates HOA Code Section 4B. Jake looked at her, puzzled but patient. "This isn't HOA land," he replied. "This is my ranch. Those rules don't apply here." Karen frowned and tapped her clipboard. "I looked up the property map online. This area falls under the Lakeview entrance zone. That trailer of yours is lowering the neighborhood's image." Jake took another sip of coffee and didn't say a word for a moment. Then he said softly, "Ma'am, I've lived here 15 years. Long before your neighborhood even existed. That map you looked at must have been drawn wrong." Karen crossed her arms. "Wow, I'm giving you 3 minutes to move that thing before I call the police." Jake almost laughed. 3 minutes? "Yes," she snapped. "The HOA doesn't tolerate rule breakers. You're trespassing on community grounds." Jake smiled faintly and nodded toward the open fields behind him. "Everything you see from here to the hills belongs to me. But you go ahead and call whoever you want." Karen glared, pulled out her phone, and began dialing. She made sure to speak loudly so Jake could hear every word. "Yes, officer. I'd like to report an aggressive man refusing HOA orders," she said dramatically. "He's being disrespectful and won't leave the property." Jake just stood there, quiet as ever. He didn't even try to stop her. He'd handled worse scenes in his career. Blue barked once as if to say, "Here we go again." While she waited for the police, Karen started snapping pictures of his ranch, the barn, the trailer, even Blue. Evidence, she muttered to herself. This will go straight to the CFO board. Jake rolled his eyes and went back inside. He filled Blue's bowl and checked on his horses. Nothing about the situation really surprised him. He had met hundreds of people like her before, people who wanted control over everyone else's lives. 15 minutes later, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up at the gate. A young deputy stepped out, looking serious. He was new to the force, only a few months in uniform. Jake recognized him immediately, Deputy Tim Carter. Jake had personally trained him when he first joined the department. Karen rushed toward the deputy before he could even shut the car door. "Thank goodness you're here," she cried. "That man is trespassing and threatening me. Arrest him." Tim blinked, looking confused. He turned his head toward Jake, who was walking down the driveway. Ma'am, are you sure? This doesn't look like HOA land." Karen huffed. "Don't question me. Just do your job. That man is breaking community law." Jake reached the gate, calm as ever. The sun was shining behind him, and his silver badge caught the light. The deputy's eyes widened when he noticed it. "Sheriff Lawson?" he said, straightening immediately. "Sir, I didn't realize." Karen froze. "Sheriff? You're the sheriff?" Jake nodded slowly. "Morning, Tim. Everything all right?" Tim looked embarrassed. "Yes, sir." She called in a complaint. "Said you were trespassing." Karen's face turned red. I didn't know. You can't expect people to recognize every officer off duty." Jake looked at her kindly but firmly. "Ma'am, I've been the sheriff of this county for 10 years. This land is under county protection, not HOA rules. You're trespassing, taking photos without permission, and filing false reports. That's not a good mix." Karen's lips trembled. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I just wanted to keep our neighborhood safe." Jake's voice stayed calm. "Safe from what?" "A man standing on his own porch." The deputy tried not to smile. Jake continued, "You can't call the law to solve personal dislikes. That's not how it works." Karen swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how foolish she looked. "I didn't know you were you." "That's the point," Jake said softly. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." For a moment, no one spoke. The wind blew gently through the grass, and Blue barked once more, breaking the silence. Karen's confident attitude melted away. She mumbled an apology, promised not to bother him again, and hurried back to her SUV, heels slipping on the gravel. Tim nodded politely to Jake. "Sorry about that, sir. Guess she didn't do her homework." Jake smiled. "No harm done. Good work showing up fast, though." The deputy laughed lightly and drove off, leaving the ranch quiet again. Karen's SUV sped away down the road. The dust settled slowly behind her. Jake leaned on his fence and looked across the open fields. The sun was higher now, casting long shadows on the barn. Blue ran in circles happily, sensing that peace had returned. Jake patted his dog's head. "People like that will never understand," he said softly. "Some fences are there for a reason." He went back to his porch, poured himself another cup of coffee, and sat down. He thought about all the strange calls he had handled over the years: stolen mailboxes, lost goats, arguments over property lines. But this one topped them all. A woman calling the cops on the sheriff himself. If only she had taken 2 minutes to listen, instead of trying to order him around. That night, Jake told the story to his friend at the diner in town. The waitress overheard and laughed so hard she almost dropped her tray. By the next morning, the tale had spread through half the county. People called it the 3-minute eviction. Even the mayor heard about it and sent Jake a text saying, "Only you could get arrested on your own ranch and still be in charge." Jake didn't mind the attention. He wasn't angry with Karen. He just hoped she learned something from the encounter. Respect and patience were worth more than any rulebook. But unknown to him, Karen wasn't done yet. The embarrassment had only made her more determined. She was planning something new, something she believed would make her look powerful again, not Jake. Had no idea that the next time she came to his ranch, things would get even more complicated, and the lesson she learned would be one she would never forget.